Masterson, donor engagement consultant on the board of directors of KY IEP Advocate. Here again with Shannon Masterson, our host of this podcast, and also the founder and executive director of KY IEP Advocate. And I'm asking her a lot of questions about how IEPs work, what the process is like, why advocates are needed, kind of all things that you need to know. We're starting a little bit high level here. And my question for today to get us started is how does this process get started?
So the IEP process gets started by somebody making a referral. Anybody can make a referral, and each school and school district will have their own referral process. But to get that started and initiate it, it can be a teacher saying, this is what I see in class, it's time for me to refer. Or it could be a parent at home recognizing, like, I'm getting a bunch of unfinished work. So is it because my child doesn't know how to do this work or needs to be supported differently in order to do the work? So anybody can make a referral. A provider in school, so an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, could make a referral for services for a kid. I talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago whose mom is an instructional assistant. Seems kind of rare that an instructional assistant would make a referral, because I would hope that a teacher in that classroom also is thinking in lines with a referral. But if that's not the case, or we have a staffing sort of problem all over the place now, so potentially you have a long-term sub who maybe isn't in the know about how to do this or has the same level of investment in students sometimes. So then in that case, the instructional assistant may be the person who spends the most time with this kid, who notices that, like, this is a kid who needs a different level of support to access education.
And we're talking about elementary, middle school, and high school, right?
Yes. So starting in kindergarten. In Kentucky, the process for preschool is a little bit different because as a general rule of thumb, you are already eligible for services in order to access preschool services. So
Easter egg, you'll talk about that more in depth later. Yeah. Yes. But right now we're talking, okay,
kindergarten through graduating from high school. Never too late to refer.
Okay. Sounds good. And then the advantage to an early referral is just more services, but anytime.
Yeah. And when we talk about preschool and early intervention, sure, early intervention is defined as birth to 3 as early intervention programs. But early intervention really is intervening when you know that that's necessary. So early intervention could happen at 7 if access to education doesn't become remarkable until 7. You are intervening early because this is now becoming remarkable to you, so you're not waiting 5 years to refer.
Okay. And again, for the referral, it's the responsibility of the school district to do it, but parents can also refer. Anyone essentially can put in that referral, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. School districts have a child find responsibility as part of IDEA, the federal regulations. So state and local school districts are responsible for finding students with disabilities or students with suspected disabilities who could be eligible for special education and initiating that evaluation process themselves. Also, kind of as a safeguard, you as a parent have the option to refer. If the district isn't referring, it is okay for you to refer. And that referral process, the process after initiating it, may look different for district to district, but that referral is getting a written request to the right person. And that written request can be something as simple as, this is my formal written request for a special education evaluation for student. What's really helpful as a parent making that request is using communication from teachers. I'm getting, behavior reports. We're getting class dojo things 4 days a week. This, potentially my child is being suspended. So this tells me that their behavior negatively impacts their education, or they're bringing home empty worksheets, or they're not bringing home any work. If they're not bringing home any work, then what are they doing all day? So sure, hands-on learning, but you should have some examples of something. So it's difficult to, use things that don't exist, but if you're getting home partial classwork, what's going on? Is it that they don't know how to finish it, or that they can't pay attention enough to finish it, or they're not sure what to do with it? All of those things can be answered when you're doing an evaluation.
Can we dig into that a little bit? Into this eligibility, like how would I know if someone needs an IEP, if that's the right fit? Like, how does a diagnosis fit into that? Is it just like these little like nuggets that you're noticing with homework and like your kids' behavior? Like what is that eligibility diagnosis kind of breadcrumby thing look like?
So eligibility versus diagnosis, while there are eligibility categories that also share the same name as a medical diagnosis, like autism, developmental delay, the district is not diagnosing autism. They are completing a form, an eligibility form that says you meet enough criteria to be eligible for services in this category, versus going to a neuropsychologist or a developmental doctor to have a medical diagnosis that will give you access to things outside of school. And eligibility in school only gives you access to services at school. So getting a medical diagnosis outside of school doesn't automatically guarantee access to services for special education. But what you can do is, this is my formal written request for a special education evaluation for student name, just diagnosed with autism, here, this date, here are the things that I see at school. And then, bulleted list, teacher gives me this feedback, I've gotten these emails on this date. And when the district makes decisions based on data, when you provide them their own data about the negative impact on education, it's difficult for them to say no, because they can't argue with the data they've already given you that you are then giving back to them.
So is that how it starts, is with that question of like, this is my formal written request? Or are you gathering, do you have like a teacher helping you along that process? Kind of like,
So
what's that look like?
in class, for a teacher referral in general, when we talk about the way classrooms are set up, for the most part, when you're talking about general education classrooms, then you're looking at a tiered system of supports. So there's still a lot of language, there's still a lot of documents that have the acronym RTI written on them, and that's response to intervention. Kentucky has moved to the acronym MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports. The process is really essentially the same. So you're looking at the multi-tiered system of supports. That's just a much better description of what's actually happening when you have a 3-tier system. So you have tier 1 intervention, and that is, if we talk about it in a reading group way, then you're looking at whole class instruction as tier 1. So you've got all 28 kids, that's probably nice, and all 33 kids in your classroom are getting tier 1 instruction. They're all getting the same thing. And then your tier 2 instruction is small group reading. So it's like bringing back a small group of kids. When we were kids, they were talking about like turtles and kitty cats and rabbits and jaguars. And so like you kind of knew who was what. And I think everybody has done a much better job of just like defining these groups in ways that don't level them, even though that is what they are. You're putting kids with similar skill sets together, and you're providing small group instruction. So that's tier 2. And then if tier 2 isn't effective, we move on to tier 3, which is really everybody leaves except 1 or 2 kids stay back. So you guys stay back and let's talk about this some more. Let's do some more. That's tier 3 intervention. If tier 3 intervention isn't solving the problem, then you're moving towards a special education evaluation because the teacher has done what they can do in the general education classroom with the tools that they have. So then the teacher would refer. And a lot of times that's like the teacher sending the referral to the special education department. In Kentucky, we have school counselors that handle that. They're called implementation coaches or ARC chairs, or of course, can't have the same name in every district, but they know who to get that information to. They may have a conversation with a parent, probably trying to feel out, do you feel good about this? Do you not feel good about this? Here's what I'm thinking about doing. You can be a part of this process. There's a lot of like approaching it with like fragility sometimes, where it's just like, oh, I don't know what you're going to think about this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And when that happens, that tells me that you have a school culture that is not supportive of special education. If you have a teacher that's like, I don't know if you notice this or like what you think, but I might have to make a referral.
That's like immediately othering that child. Like,
Absolutely.
oh, I've got bad news for you. Your kid's gonna
Yes.
have issues reading, or your
Yeah.
kid might have issues seeing, or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever it
Right.
is.
Right.
Well,
But versus same conversation, which is, hey, here's what we've done. I've done this, this, and this. And here's what I'm going to do next because I'm going to get your kid access to more supports because we have that here. Same result. You have a referral meeting and you're signing the consent to evaluate your kid.
yeah.
But you can get a really good feel from the beginning of what the culture is like about students receiving services in your school,
That's
actually, from just one conversation.
wow. Yeah. But important and helpful, and like helpful for, I imagine, parents who are like trying to evaluate. Like you can pick up on just the way, at a parent teacher conference or something, the way your teacher is talking to you about your kids and stuff like that.
And there's a
Okay.
lot of like
Yeah.
your comment about othering language,
Yeah.
and there's just a lot to be said about where we are and where we could be, just
Yeah.
as treating people as equals. And just because you need a different level of support doesn't make you any less than anybody else or less valuable, or that you shouldn't have access to learning.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there are schools and there are people that will remind you that like you don't want to have a kid who gets those services.
Mm. I feel like
When
that's another
really,
hype girl moment for you to be like, your kid's still your kid. Your kid's still human. Like, no matter what, we're all humans. We should all be treated the same. And like, do not let anyone ever try to make you feel any different than that.
yeah, I mean, your kid is still the same kid that woke up yesterday. They just get extra help for reading now, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. So those tiers of interventions that you were talking about, that those are normal, typical things that happen in classrooms, right?
For everybody.
For everybody. But say we get to that, your kid's in a classroom, you've gone through those different tiers of intervention, but now there's still something that needs to be dug into more. They're still struggling for whatever reason. We don't know what happens next.
So then after you send that email as a parent, after you send that email that says formal written request for a special education evaluation, send that to anybody. Anybody at that school is going to know the person to get that to. Then you'll get together as a team and talk about what are the things that are happening that make us think this is the best next step, which is why including communication from the teacher is really helpful in that email. These are work samples that I'm getting. These are like, I'm asking my child to read things to me and they're not able to do it. And that concerns me. They're bringing home books that they cannot read to me, and that concerns me. So when you're using those real life examples from school as data to support your request, then they really can't argue too much with you asking because they can't refute their own data when they've
Yeah.
already given you all that information. So you get together as a team and you sign a form that's called the consent to evaluate, and that plans the evaluation. And we can talk more later about what's on that and why that's important. But that is the document that you review and sign in the referral meeting. And once you have signed that in Kentucky, school districts have 60 school days to complete all their evaluations and determine if a student is eligible.
And then I'll just drop a nugget here. Shane and I were talking before this about how that 60 school days in Kentucky is different. That is interpreted differently in different states. So if you are listening to this from a different state, then you might not have 60 school days. It could be 60 days. It could be whatever that is. But stay tuned. We'll dig more into that in your next episode, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds good. Any other kind of takeaways from just like, how does this get started? I know my takeaways here are it's never too late to get a referral. Anyone can get a referral. And just kind of pay attention to the language being used, pay attention to the feedback that you're getting to the school or getting from the school to kind of evaluate whether or not this might be kind of your next step that might make the most sense.
And knowing that when you're talking about evaluations, the evaluations, like from an occupational therapy perspective, an evaluation at school may look really similar to an evaluation at an outpatient clinic or an evaluation that I would do in somebody's house. That test is the same, but then what school is looking for, something else to talk about later too, is that's not school related. Like, we don't do that in school. And that's really hard for me to really kind of figure out at what point would we not be doing that, because doesn't life impact your education? So something to talk about later.
Yeah.
But knowing that the purpose of these evaluations at school are to determine if the negative impact is large enough to then be eligible for services. So just because things aren't looking the way that you think they should look and your kids aren't learning the way that you think they should, that doesn't ensure eligibility. And having an outside medical diagnosis doesn't guarantee eligibility. What they have to do is the evaluations to determine how big is that negative impact, because then the goal of the services and the accommodations and the modifications is to reduce that negative impact of said disability so that it is not negatively impacting your education and you have equitable access to education.
So important. Exclamation point at the end of that.
Yes. Yes.
And then
equitable access.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if there are anything that we've talked about in this episode or in previous episodes that you want to take a deep dive on, be sure to go to kyepadvocate.org. Check out KYEP Advocate on Facebook and Instagram. Now, whenever this comes out, it will be on YouTube. And Shannon's ready to conquer the world and really help everyone. So just wait another week and we might have 4 other places for you to look for resources and things that might just kind of help you out along the process as you keep going. And just remember, you're not alone. You've got support kind of everywhere and you've got support in us.